Hi everyone. What we're going to be doing here in this video is scaffolding a little bit on the previous learnings that we've had in class. We're going to take this bag pattern here and we're going to look at different types of perforation pattern. We're also going to be looking at alternate types of bag design. So here we can see a few Coco Chanel bags, Dior bag as well. And they have different types of patterned perforations. And I'll talk to you about how to create these patterns inside Rhino and Grasshopper for export back out for different processes. Okay, let's get patterning. Alright, what we're going to be doing is I am using this tote bag pattern from Taika Studios. You can get it if you want, or different patterns on Etsy. I've got a link in the script and there's no association with this. It's just an interesting pattern that I downloaded. We'll also talk through how to create a general gridded pattern and then use a grid of lines to hide away certain perforated holes. We'll talk about how to make large, small, alternating pattern and how to put it on a diamond grid, but then also how to create it on more like a chevron pattern. And then how to take some diamonds. In my example, I've got triangles, which is a little bit harder. And how to get a perforated pattern, predefined pattern to flow across that. So, alright, now we can see here in the script, this is the pattern for the tote bag. I brought it in and redrew it in Rhino. And the link to the tote bag is here. And what we can see is that we've got this general panel, this side panel, we've got the outside edge, we've got the seam allowance, and then we've got a perforated pattern with a distance between that seam allowance. And we've been doing that for quite some time now in class, but I'm just going to show you a few extra things that make the patterning more interesting. And what we're going to be doing is we've used the single point attractor and we've also used the curve attractor, a single curve. But now we're going to look at multi-curve and multi-points. And here you can see examples in the script in using circles and then in using a polygon with 4 sides. And you can see the same, effectively, the same geometries and then the different patterns that we get out. Okay, so if we have a look at this script, it's the same as everything that we've been working on. We've got a cell here, it's a hexagon cell. And we've got the outside of our pattern. We've got our offset, seam allowance. We're saying take a list of points and cull them. Keep the internal, remember 2 coming out of the relationship. Everything with a 2 is what we keep. And then a certain distance from the edge. You can see if I change this, they get closer to the edge. A certain distance from the edge, cull the points so that we don't have any geometry there. That's all fairly standard. We've been doing that a lot. And then also with a single point attractor, if I preview that, you can see the attractor here. We've been using those as well. So I'm going to hide that away. But what we're doing here, if I preview this curve, is I've got 3 curves. I'm going to use these to drive the pattern. So if we come across here, you'll note that previously we used curved closest point, and we got a set of distances from the points to the curve, and then we plug that into the remapping of the values between 0 and 1. so that we could get the different scales of the circles appearing in our pattern. But what we're doing here is we're actually adding a little bit more to the code, and I'll just grab a couple of panels here to show you what's happening. I'll grab another panel, and if I take these distances and plug them in here, ooh, it didn't happen. Take it and plug it into there. You'll see we've got a bunch of distances, and what we've done is we've grafted. If I don't graft these, if I just had them as flattened, you'll see I'll just get a bunch of numbers. But what I want to do is I've got 3 curve attractors here. So if I graft the data coming in, I'll be able to measure my points to each individual line and just get the set of points closest to that line. So if I graft it, I'll get here a grouping of my lines and the first point, and I'll get a set of distances, and so on and so forth. So if I got the tree visualizer and plug that in, I've got 194 branches and there's 3. So sets of data, which is because we've got 3 curves. And if I draw that tree and zoom in, you can see I've got 1, 2, 3, and then I've got all the branches, which are the points that we've got inside this pattern. Okay, I'm just going to remove that. Now what we're doing is we're using this to sort the list, and we're sorting the list to each line and getting a set of values back. So if I take this and plug it in here, what we're doing is we're sorting all these numbers, and you'll notice that they're rearranged. They actually don't match this one. We're sorting them all to the first curve, the second curve, and the third curve. And we're making sure that all of the numbers that go to the first curve, which is 0, all align first. Then all of the numbers that go to the second curve all come in second, and then to the third curve they all come in third. And so we're getting all of our bits of data aligned. And then what we're doing is we're listing the items. So here we're relisting them and packing them back together. So if I plug that into there, you can see I've got all my points again, and all of my points are basically realigned and telling me from this line, and this line, these are all the distances. If I unflatten that, you'll note that they've come in 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and if I scroll down, down, they're all 0 and all to different points. And if I flatten that, now they're all just grouped together. And what that does is that gives us all the distances in indexing to each line. And effectively, what that allows us to do, what this script does here, is it allows us to have multiple curves come in, and then if we plug in this relay, you'll note that we're scaling smallest near the curve and then largest away from it, and we can see that we can get these nice organic patterns happening here. Now if we didn't do that, if we just took this distance and plugged it in here and then unflattened this okay, sometimes you can make Rhino crash, and it looks like I might have made Rhino crash. Alright, you can see here that what we've done is it's only taking the distances to the first line, which is this one here, and it's ignoring the other two. So that's why we need to sort the list. So again, if I take this and plug it in here and then graft, this bit of code now allows you to take in multiple lines. I could have more than 3, I could have 4 or 8. and it'll organize all the points and give you the scaling to that. So that's a really fantastic thing, multi-curve tractor. And then also what we've done is I've taken all of the points. I'm going to hide these curves. Taken all the points, and what I've done is I've used a tool here, and you can see I've got some notes for you. And if we hold Control Alt and then click, you can see where this bounding box is. And what this bounding box is if we preview it, it's a box that's unioned, so it's one box that fits around all of our points. And what it allows us to do, and you can actually see them here, 1, 2, 3, 4 points. And if we look here, we've got number slider 4, is we're populating the geometry with a random set of points. So if I increase this, you can see that there's a random number of points increasing in here. And then I can just reseed them, so I can scatter them around, and they all change quite quickly. I'm going to hide this bounding box. And now what we can do is we can plug these points. So taking the population, I'm looking at closest point to my cloud of points. And the good thing here is that with these multiple points, we don't have to do what we did above. This will just automatically look at the distances to all of these points. And if I plug this relay in, you can see our pattern here is scaled, large circles in between the points and small circles near where all the points are. And if I change this down, you can see our grid and our graphic of points is changing. And if I reseed it, you can see that we get all these different patterns appearing. And we could save all those as a set of images for, say, a presentation, for example. Different graphic elements. Maybe we like this one. Okay, so that's the only difference of what we've done to a script is here we've added in these multi-curves, and here we've added in random points. What I've also done is if I disable this script, I've got the middle of the tote bag, and I've effectively done the same thing. So if I enable this script and then pan across, there is the script. And what I've done is it's exactly the same script, except I'm using populate 2D. I've got my curve here. If I preview that, I've got the outline of my pattern. I have a distance offset for the seam allowance, exactly the same setup again. And then what I've done is I've got a line, and if I look at this curve here, I've got a line here, and I'm using the multi-curve attractor again. It's fine, it doesn't matter if I've only got one curve, it's fine. And I'm using that to give a faded pattern, so the further away they get smaller and the closer they are they get larger. So I've got this linear graded or gradated pattern. And we can see here, if I just change the options in our remapping, that I can make the squares closer bigger, and then here I'm making them the numbers further away smaller. And if we reversed it, the opposite would happen. Again, that's just scaling, and it's scaling a polygon with 4 sides. And then what I've done is I've created this little random rotation generator. So if I come back here and I preview this, and I come right to the end and I preview this rendering off, what we can see here is our geometry, and they're all aligned in the same angle. Yeah. what I'm able to do here, if I preview this and preview this one off, is I've just sort of given them all a little bit of jitter. Yeah, they're just slightly all arranged at a different angle. And what I've done is I've taken this option here called random. So if I go Control Alt random, you can see it's coming from sets and then sequence random, and I'm taking in my geometry and I'm setting up a domain because it wants a range of numbers, and I've set those numbers up to be from 0 to 360. I've got the length of my list, so that'll be 193 points, and then I can randomize the rotation of all of those individual diamonds, and then in rotation with degrees set. So if I right click, here, I can set degrees rather than by default it's radians, and you won't see much happen. Set it to degrees, and now we've got that geometry rotating a little bit. And if I adjust the seed, you can see that the diamonds are slightly rotating depending on where they are. Now if I hide that, what I've done is I have, actually no, I'll turn that preview back on because that's really the geometry. What I've done is I've made a mirror line in the middle of my pattern. So if I preview this, there it is there, and I'm mirroring here, mirroring geometry around the XZ plane. So it's the XZ, so it's along the X, and then we get a mirror of the geometry up here. So if I preview that, there we go, we've got our preview up here. And obviously we can just, by having the mirror, create this here, and we'll get the opposite up there. So that's a really good way, and we could mirror in on other planes as well. For example, if I plug that in there, I could do the YZ, and then I'd get a pattern over here somewhere. If I plug that in, you can see here it's mirroring around this endpoint here on that line, and we're getting a pattern over there. But that's not what we want. We want it in the XZ, and now we're getting a nice pattern up there. And if we move that line, this mirroring will change. Okay, I'm going to disable that one. And I'm going to come in, I'm going to come back to this pattern here, but I'm just going to look at here, creating a grid, and then looking at these central circles and deleting them out. So what we've got is we've got our standard square grid. If I preview that, it should, I haven't turned the script on yet. Drag across, enable. You can see here we've got a grid, and we've got all the circles are on that grid. We're taking the points from the grid, and again I've got my bag. If I preview, I've got my outline of my pattern. If I preview here, I've got my seam allowance, exactly the same. Remove all the points outside, remove the points a certain distance from, and then what I'm doing here is I'm looking at this diamond grid and then this hatched grid, and if I preview that, you can see it here, and if I preview this one, you can see it running like that. And we can plug different ones in. So if I just take this and plug it in, And in order to make the video easier to see, I'm going to hide this, hide, come back over here. So all I'm doing is I've got multiple curves coming in, and I've got all my points and I'm listing them, all the distances to the curves, and there's lots and lots in here, and then I'm remapping them just the same as what we've done before. But here, if I hide, whoops, if I hide this one, you can see that we're taking this grid and we're making these points disappear. What you might find is that some of them aren't disappearing because you need to go in and fine tune your grid. So what you can do is you can bake, for example here, bake the geometry out onto a layer. There's no need to group it. And what we can do is then we can reselect all these and reset them all back in, set multiple curves. And now if I grab one of these and I move it, you'll note that the pattern is changing. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that these points here are gone. And you can go in and refine tune your pattern to make sure that you're getting rid of the right points so that you've got this nice repeating pattern here. And we can do the same thing for the other grid, plug that in. Now it's changed. Let's just hide this. I'm going to delete it. Actually, no, I want to internalize it first. Internalize. Now, delete it. And you can see the difference. So if we plug both of these in, hold down Shift, you can see we've got this interesting random pattern here. It's a little bit like what the Dior bag was doing. Okay, I am going to disable that. Now we're going to look at a diamond grid where we have alternating sized circles. And what I'm going to do is use a diamond grid here and then drive this. So if I enable this script, and then zoom in here, you'll note that we're actually using a few different plugins here. Now, they're all on the system at RMIT and also in my desktop. Here what we're doing is I've made a curve. If I preview that, I've made an outside curve just by basically clicking on a rectangle and dragging it out and making it a certain size. Then I've brought a surface, so Control-Alt-Tick, surface from primitives in, and that makes a flat surface inside this curve. And we're using diamond panels from Lunchbox plugin, and it needs a surface. So here we've created this surface, and we can divide it in U and V divisions, 14, which is what I've got, and then we get this nice diamond grid. So if I hide, preview off, and preview on, you can see we get these individual surfaces here, diamond panels. There's 85 of them. The triangle panels we're not using, they're these outside ones. We're not using those, we're only using these internal ones. So inside Control-Alt-Click, inside surface, we've got this tool called Brep Edges. And Brep Edges lets us take the naked edge, the outside edge of a surface, and we can utilize that outside edge. And you can see that we had 85 surfaces, and that gave us 340 curves. What's really important to remember is because we've got faces that match each other, and a face has 4 edges, each face will give 2 lines that sit over each other. And we need to get rid of the duplicated lines, and we only want to keep 1 edge so that we're not, making 4 times almost the amount of work that we need Grasshopper to do. So inside another plugin that's already on the computers at RMIT, if we go Control Alt and click, we can see from Kangaroo that there's a tool called Remove Duplicate Lines. Now this removes straight lines, not curves, and it'll remove all of the lines that we don't need, and you can see it's left us with 196 locally defined values. So we went from having 340 and now we've got 196. So that's fantastic. So let's just hide this, preview off. I can preview that on. Now there's only 196 lines. And what we're doing is we're actually dividing each curve up so that there are 4 points on the curve. So if I preview this, you can see we've got each line and we're putting 4 points onto it. Now what that means is it's actually going to be 5 because it's 0. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And what we're going to do is we're going to take these points and we're actually going to split them into 2 lists. So we're going to say, look at the first few. In fact, what I'll do is I'll just go to display number and put some numbers on all the points. And I'll need to make that a little bigger. So I'll just make a slider, say 1.10. We'll plug that into here. And then we'll make the numbers bigger. Yeah, and you can see here we've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then we've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 on every edge. And what we're going to do is we're going to split these lists. And then what I'm doing here is I'm culling that pattern. We've used cull pattern a lot, but I'm just saying to cull the pattern so that it's false true. So here, if we click on this and we preview it, and then I'll need to go back and de-preview, preview off, you can see that there's a dot only in the large circle. So it's going false, true, false, true, false, true. So that's fantastic. So that's giving us a list of points to make the big circles. And then here, if I preview this one on and preview that off, you can see that I've got points in the small circles. And here we can see that it's the reverse pattern. And what I've done to reverse the pattern is I've right clicked and I've said invert. And what invert will do is it'll invert this so it'll make it true, false. And that's what we can see. True, false, true, false, true. And it continues on, and it just keeps repeating. So this is a really interesting way. If I turn that invert off, you'll note that I've only got false, true, false, true, false. And now I've got a pattern with 2 circles in it. But if I click on this one here and go invert, I get it true, false, true, false, true. And that's a way of being able to get different bits of geometry so that you can make these different size circles on the grid. And then we get that effectively, preview that off, we get that Coco Chanel bag. And if I go and bring back we get that pattern here. So true, false, true, false, true, and then false, true, false, true, false. And we get that nice perforated pattern that we could cut into this bag. Alright, what I'm going to do is disable this one. And now we're going to talk about something different. If I enable, it's using the same logic, but in a different way as the last example. So I'm going to enable this. Here it is up here. And what we've done is I've drawn my own pattern. So I've made effectively here, I've drawn a rectangle like this. I've grabbed that point there and I've brought it out on an angle like that. Then I've offset it a certain amount, and you can offset by just typing offset, press enter. You can choose what side it offsets on. So zoom in here, you can see it's offsetting outwards, it's offsetting inwards, and you can set the distance here by just pressing on distance and then typing. If I type 10, you can see that now it's offsetting twice as far. Then I click that, and then I drew a series of lines on a 45-degree angle. So I just drew some lines from that point up here. In fact, I can just go shift and draw it vertically and then press enter. And then I can say rotate, type it in the command line, rotate from endpoint, and then from the top, and then rotate 45. And now you can see it's rotated that. If I said 30, it's actually, back. Let's type in 30. You can see here it's on a 30-degree angle. And then I just made copies down so that I had my geometry. And then I trimmed this edge around this edge here so that the lines didn't go all the way. Now, if we look here at the script, I've got my curve, which I didn't bake in. I'll go and fix that for the tutorial for you. I'll just delete that. But what we have here is all of these curved lines. Now, what you'll notice is that I've got them here, I'm displaying the points, and I've got them all in order. You can see here 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on till I get to 21. If you right click, let's take this curve, let's go Control C, Control V. Okay, I'm going to bake that out. Bake it onto a layer. I'm not going to group it. So there they are there. If I plug this one into here, you can see the numbers haven't changed. If we right click and say set multiple curves, and we just drag across all these curves and then press enter, you'll note that they're all in order. Sometimes what will happen is that you'll drag like that and all of these numbers won't be in order. So what you actually have to manually do to get them all in order is to click and then go set multiple and then come in here and then click 1, 2, 3, 4, and now we're adding each curve in order. And we just need to work through our grid. And then when we've selected them all in order and pressed enter, all these numbers will realign. It's actually quite important sometimes, and it was important for this process where we were listing and splitting these alternate patterns. If we didn't go, even, odd, even, odd, even number. These patterns went crazy and they didn't look right. So I just needed to make sure I chose my lines in order. You can see we use the same process here. We've got the same circles here and it gives us the result. And then we effectively mirrored on this line here. I put a line at the bottom. That's this curve. And then I said, look at the end points of the curve. Put a plane, happens to be now in the Y direction. And we used mirror again. And then that got us the mirrored pattern. So if I preview that, that got us this mirrored pattern over here for our bag. And now we've got this really nice mirrored V pattern, which simulates, it's not the same, it simulates this pattern here. These aren't on 45, they're more like 30 degrees. Okay, so the last thing that I want to show you is how I made this alternating and what looks to be randomly rotated triangle pattern. What I did, actually let's delete that, we don't need it, delete. What I did was I created a triangle grid. So if I preview the triangle grid, here it is here. And basically I found the center of the triangle grid. There's all the centers. And what I did was I baked these two. So if I go shift and then I said bake, and I baked it to a layer, and again I didn't group it. Okay, so and then you have to do them individually. Bake, I don't know, layer 4, don't group. So now I've got all my points and all my triangles, and what I did was I selected it down to here and I said delete, and I selected it this way and I said delete, and then I selected that last point and delete, and I got this triangle and this center point. And then what I did was I grabbed it and I've got my grid snap turned on and I moved it. Now what I did was I just drew some lines, and you can be a lot more precise and you could mirror them and make sure that they're all exactly the same. And then I drew another one like that, and then I drew another one up to this point. Okay, now because I've got grid snap on, it's very hard to lock onto that point. But what we can do is we can turn on point here, point, and now it snaps to that point, and then enter. And then I can press enter on the keyboard and my line stops precisely on that point. That's really important because we want to use that point to relocate all the copies that we make onto each point in the different triangles so that they all match up. Okay, so that's fairly critical. Then what I did was I brought in all these lines. So I'm going to delete this and I'll just preview on. There's my lines there. And then I divided the largest one, preview, with 12 points. I divided the middle one, or the smallest triangle, with 6 points evenly. And remember, if we go Control Alt and click, we can find where all of these are. And then on the curve, on the straight line, I just chose the endpoints preview. So again, Control Alt click, there's endpoints, and that gives us all the points we require to be able to put circles on here and then use the center and then match them all back up. So what I did was I used merge. So if, again, Control Alt click, merge, and merge lets us group a bunch of different things together, and it's basically bringing all these points together. So if I turn this preview off and turn the preview of the lines off, and I'll show you the preview of the merge, you can see I've got all of these points merged together except for the middle of the triangle, because I'm not going to put a circle on the middle of the triangle, and I've grouped them. So I can group them all, yeah? And that's pretty similar to grouping, like in Photoshop, or sorry, in Illustrator or other programs that you've used. You can group things together. Control Alt click. So there's group, and we also have ungroup, which is really important, and we'll use that. And then I've got my center, and I've put a plane, an XY plane. Here we've got X and Y, so a flat plane, and if I preview that, you can see I put a plane here. And each one of these points also has a plane, an XY plane, and we're basically matching plane to plane. And I'm using this this script actually has a lot of new things for you. So Control Alt and then click. We're using orient, and what we can do is we can orient geometry with a target, a source point, that's the middle of this triangle, to a target point, and the target point is the centers of all of these triangles, and it'll make a copy of this geometry into each one of these points, but it won't rotate them properly yet, so it'll look very messy. So if I right click and go preview, you can see a straight copy has just been placed into every point. Okay, so I'm going to hide all of that. Preview off. And what I'm going to show you, I'm going to preview on the points. So you can see I've got 76. If I include the 0, I've got 77 points. And so I'm taking these points, 77, and I need to ignore the 77. I just need 76. And we can list an index, and from a plugin that we're going to use for the next assignment, Pufferfish, we can choose the last index minus 1. Okay, so that gives us 76 out. If you're struggling with the other assignments, this more advanced one is probably going to be hard for you until probably the end of the semester. So what we're doing here is we're basically saying rotate these geometries here, rotate them a specific angle around a specific point. Yeah, the point is the center of every triangle. And if I preview this on, you'll note that we've got a much cleaner grid now because we've rotated all of these triangles. And what we've done is we've taken a panel. If I double click the panel, I've written in different angles. And what I'm telling you up here is to right click and say multiple line data. You need to click this. If you don't click it, you won't get these numbers here. If I turn it off, you'll notice that nothing happened. It needs to know which one's first, which one's second, which one's third. And the way we do that is by saying multiple line data. So first, second, third, fourth. And because we've got a list, we're saying give me a list of 76 versions of these numbers here, and you'll note that they're listing out in order. And then we're rotating our geometry. Now we've got a beautiful random, looks like to be a random pattern. It's just 120 degree rotation, 60 degree rotation, 0 rotation, 180 degree rotation. And it's basically matching these numbers. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. So this one's on 120. This one here is on 60 degrees. This one's on 0. And then this one's on 180 degrees. And then it repeats. So this one's on 120. This one's on 60. This one's on 0. And then it rolls down to the bottom. And then this one's on 180. And so on and so forth until it gets to the end of the list. So just hide that away. And then because there's a little bit of overlap, let's turn the preview off. What I've done is I've basically shrunk down this geometry to get a little bit of spacing here. And I can adjust that so that they're either smaller or they're larger, and you can get the spacing so that you can visually see the pattern a little bit more. And that could be whatever you want. Then I ungroup them. So then I've got 1,617 points. And then I use the same thing again, the same curve. Let's preview that on. The same seam allowance. Preview that on. Points inside, keep them. Take away the points a certain distance to that seam allowance. Put a radius circle on. And then I've just got a little preview here. You can see we get these beautiful little rotated patterns that alternate so that the top of the point and the open bottom rotates around. Here it's 180, then it's rotating 120, then it's rotating 60, yeah, and you can see the pattern coming out. So here we've created this really nice little rotation on a triangle grid. I know that that is probably a lot to take in, but if you're advancing along and you want to challenge yourself, then this is a great little extra script to look at that can challenge you in multi-attractor points, multi-attractor curves, setting up multiple different grids to erode your pattern away, to look at grid lines and then alternating true false and turning bits of data off and creating different sized perforations. And then here doing the same thing with a little bit of manual line drawing in Rhino, and then taking that in and using the script to create this nice perforated pattern that mirrors itself. Okay, I'm going to make another video for you to show you how to take the patterns out of Rhino and put them into Illustrator, and then use, say, a graphic or a gradient to create a color fill, say for digital printing or for screen printing. Okay, thanks everyone.